Now that we talked a little bit about critical thinking, so now we know what it is, why it's important, and how it works, let's talk a little bit more about paraphrasing. So again, remember that paraphrasing means to say or express the same idea using different words. So now that we know what that is, the next important question, of course, to ask is, why is paraphrasing so important? And there are several reasons why paraphrasing is a very important technique to practice, especially when you're learning a foreign language or another language. And it's especially important in English because English is a world language. So the first reason, and this is why English teachers will always paraphrase or often paraphrase what they're saying to students, you'll notice I do it as well in the videos, is just to be sure that everyone can understand the information clearly. So the number one reason why we paraphrase, and we do this in our own language, of course, as well, is to make sure everyone understands clearly. So this means that if I want you to understand what I'm saying very clearly, I should try to say it two different ways. Now, this becomes important when you're doing the IELTS speaking section and writing section. So any important information that you want to make sure your listener or your reader will understand, try to paraphrase it. So say it in different ways. Okay, the second reason why paraphrasing is so important is to check the understanding of other people. So if I want to check how well you understand what I'm saying, then I will ask you to say the same information but using different words. So for example, if I say something like, the weather is horrible outside today, so I'm not going to work. Did you understand what I just said? If you understand what I said, you should be able to say that a different way. Like, yes, what you said is that you're not going to your job because it's rainy or bad weather outside. So same information in a different way shows me that you understand what I'm saying. Because of this, paraphrasing is the number one tool used in the IELTS listening and IELTS reading sections to check your knowledge. So that means that in the listening section, the questions will be the same information that you hear, but using different words. Okay? And also in the reading, you're going to see that the questions are going to have the same or similar information as the passage, but again, it's going to be different words. So a second reason to paraphrase is to check the understanding of others. Okay? Now, again, remember that because English is an international language, this skill is very important. You're going to meet lots of people from many different parts of the world, and you're going to use paraphrasing, especially for these two reasons, to make sure they all understand you clearly and to be able to check their understanding of what you're saying. All right, so to check the understanding of others, you're going to see that in the speaking section, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, there's ways that you can do this for the questions with the examiner in the speaking section. So for example, if you don't understand the information of the question, then you should try to catch one or two words and maybe try to paraphrase what the examiner is asking you. So for example, you can say something like this. To make sure I understand the question, you are asking about, and then here try to fill in what you think the examiner is asking you about. Now again, remember, this is just for the speaking section, and we will look at more examples of this when we look specifically at the speaking section. So to make sure I understand the question you're asking about, school, let's say, for example, if you think that the examiner is asking you about school, this will help you to think about the question more, and it will also help you to come up with a better answer. So again, we check the understanding of others, but we also check our own understanding by trying to paraphrase what we think the other person is saying. Now, the third reason why paraphrasing is so important is to emphasize information. So if I want to make information sound really, really important for you, I'm going to say it a couple different ways. Like, if I really want you to leave, I'm going to say something like, let's go, we should leave, we must get out of here, come on, let's exit the room. So I'm going to say it a few different ways to make it sound really important. So another reason, or a third reason, is to emphasize information. So to make it sound important. And this is why in the writing section for your main ideas, you should try to paraphrase some of the information. And also for part 2 of the speaking, when you're saying the important main idea, you should repeat it at the end of your 2-minute or 1-minute presentation to again emphasize the key or important information. So these are some of the reasons for paraphrasing. There's some more, but these are some of the most important. So again, why do we need to paraphrase information? To make sure everyone understands clearly, to check the understanding of others, such as to make sure I understand the question you're asking about school or something like that, and to emphasize information, so to make information sound important. For these reasons, paraphrasing is a major part of the IELTS exam. If you can do good paraphrasing, you should have no problem to get a great score in the IELTS or other kinds of tests. So of course, the next question that we should answer is how? How can we paraphrase? All right, so how can we paraphrase? There are lots of different techniques for paraphrasing. We even paraphrase with our hands and body language. The IELTS uses several different paraphrasing techniques to create the question. So if you're familiar with these techniques, then you're going to see how the answers and questions are created much more clearly, and you'll be able to find the information a lot easier from the listening and the reading. Also, this will help you in your writing and in your speaking, because you're going to see different ways that you can paraphrase the information. So on the left side here, I'm going to put the method. Method means the way of paraphrasing. And then on the left side here, I'm going to put the example. All right, so let's start here with the example first. Let's say we have the word big. What's another way to say the word big? Okay, well, one way, maybe you just thought about it, is by saying huge or large. There are a lot of words that are very similar to big, such as huge, large, gigantic, enormous, and so on. Any word that is similar to another word is called that word's synonym. So Synonyms are the most basic way to paraphrase words, basically by choosing another word that has a close or similar kind of meaning. All right, now, the opposite of a synonym is what we call an antonym. So, for example, if we have the word stay, the antonym of stay, or the opposite of stay, is leave. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that doesn't mean the same thing. It's quite the opposite. Exactly. But just like in math, where -1 times -1 is +1, it works the same in language. Not all the time, but often it can work the same. So an antonym plus negative will become that word's positive in many situations. So if I want to make leave the same as stay in the information, I'm just going to add the words don't or do not. So don't leave is the same as saying stay. And for sure you're going to see in the IELTS some questions that use this kind of paraphrasing to see if you understand the question or the reading and so on, if you can make the match. All right, a third way of paraphrasing are expressions. Expressions include things like phrasal verbs, and idioms. So, for example, the idiom to be on the same page. To be on the same page means that you and I are looking at the same page. This is an idiom though, so it doesn't mean a real same page. It just means the same idea or the same thought. So to be on the same page means to understand the same idea. Now, there are lots and lots of idioms and phrasal verbs that are used throughout the IELTS, so it's important to be familiar with some of them because, again, this is a paraphrasing technique that's used on the IELTS. A fourth way of paraphrasing is what's called grammar. Now, I know many students don't like grammar, and grammar can be difficult, but grammar is very important in English. Grammar allows you to paraphrase or say the same idea using different words. So, for example, let's take this sentence. I have visited Japan. So, I have visited Japan is present perfect, of course. We have the auxiliary verb have for present perfect. We have the past participle visited. So this sentence is present perfect. I have visited Japan. Now, when you study present perfect, you will learn that there are some important reasons for using present perfect. If you want to review this, go to the free writing course on the AE Help website, and it will explain these concepts to you for present perfect. When you say I have visited Japan, it's different from saying I was in Japan. If you say I was in Japan, it means that this experience was maybe not so important in your life. However, if you say I have visited Japan, so you choose the present perfect to express your ideas, it means that this was an important situation in your life. So this sentence actually means I experienced visiting Japan, and this continues to be important for me. So these 4 words, I have visited Japan, mean the same as this long sentence. I experienced visiting Japan, and this continues to be important for me. Because again, present perfect emphasizes importance. Now there's lots of other grammar that will paraphrase ideas in different ways. All right, and a 5th way of paraphrasing is what's called descriptive. Descriptive paraphrasing basically means I describe something and then you understand what that is through the description. So for example, it's red, round, and delicious. What is it? It's an apple. So by describing to you that it's red, round, and delicious, you can figure out that it's an apple. So I'm basically paraphrasing apple simply by describing what it is. On the IELTS, you're going to see that they use all 5 of these different techniques for different kinds of questions. Now here's something interesting for you to remember. If I want to make a question on the IELTS more difficult, all I need to do is to make the paraphrasing more difficult. If I want to ask you an easy question, maybe I'm going to use just a simple synonym. If I want to increase the difficulty of that question, then I'm probably going to use an antonym and a negative and maybe an expression combined together. If I want to make it really difficult, then maybe I'll choose 3 of these techniques and use them together, and you'll see that the question will look very different from what you hear or what you read, but it's still the same information. So I could use grammar, I could use an expression, and I could use a synonym all in the same question. This is how I can increase the difficulty of the question. So remember that when you're reviewing and practicing your IELTS exams. Okay, so just to summarize, again, different ways of paraphrasing are synonyms, antonym and negative, using expressions such as phrasal verbs and idioms, using grammar, or using descriptive language. And to increase the difficulty, I can use combinations of these. You'll see that in university, professors will sometimes use 4 or 5 techniques in one question. Okay, so now that we're very clear on what paraphrasing is, why we need to paraphrase, and how we can paraphrase, let's look at some practice exercises that we can do before the exam so that we can observe and see paraphrasing much faster and much more clearly.